If you've seen the movie Sixth Sense, spoiler alert, I might mention the end accidentally, but if, it's an old movie, hopefully you will have seen it by now. And if you haven't, go watch it. But once you've seen the ending, you can't see that movie the same way again. And I think that's the same with many things in our lives. Once we've seen it one way, we can't unsee it. Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses with me today, your host, Jules Wyman. And I want to have a rambling around paradigm shifts and about how much we can get so locked into seeing something in one way. And unless either the world, life, everyday system gives us a shove, we're not going to see it in a different way. And that's why I mentioned the movie Sixth Sense. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, the premise of the movie is this young lad who sees dead people, is having this conversation with what he assumes is a therapist to help him with everything that's going on. And it's only toward the end of the movie that you realize that the therapist, Bruce Willis, is also actually dead, but he doesn't know it. And it's only when he's toward the end of it that he realizes that he's a dead guy too. Now, I did go back and watch it fairly soon after I discovered the ending. And it's so brilliant that there's little things that when you look at it through that lens, you can see where the eye contact isn't happening with the people who can't see Bruce Willis. And it's phenomenal. It's so clever. And it's a real paradigm shift because you now can't see that movie the same way. But what many of us don't realize in our lives is that our everyday has become this one way of being, this we perceive ourselves in a particular way. We've got hooked up to an identity of I am, fill in the blank. And I don't just mean I am and there's your job title. I mean the stuff that we've carried for years. So I'm a good person, I'm a bad person, I'm enough, I'm not enough, I'm worthless, I'm inadequate, I'm unimportant. We've got hooked up on those identities. And until we have a paradigm shift of seeing that those thoughts, those identities are not solid, they're not true, then they're going to be in charge. That's the world that we're going to be living through. That's the lens that we're going to be experiencing life through. And for me, I've had a number of these little shifts over however many years, I've no idea. But it can happen in different ways. And very often now, what I start to do is think about, am I choosing this, or has this kind of somehow been planted into my psychology that I think I'm choosing it, but actually I'm choosing it because. And there's so many things that I can think of. So one of the big ones for me a few years back that I suddenly went, oh my God, I've been chasing a red gilet, not literally, metaphorically, been chasing this red gilet. I had a specific in my head red gilet that I was looking for. It had to be a particular color, a certain kind of puffiness. And it took me years before I finally found the one that I was looking for. And then I'd had it for quite some time. I'd had it a number of years. I think that I was then getting ready to go out one day. And as I walked past the full length mirror, I caught sight of myself and went to turn and go, yeah, that was the look I was going for. But actually, as I was turning, I suddenly realized what was stood in front of me was Michael J. Fox's character from Back to the Future. Now, I was quite obsessed with that movie and specifically Michael J. Fox. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, have I been looking for this red gilet for me, or because I was so connected to that as a child that it's been influencing me? And that's what I was looking for. That was my way of connecting to Michael J. Fox, was this red gilet. And then there's these other moments in my life where I have I've gone to buy something and I've had to pause and go, am I buying this, or have I been influenced by advertising? Am I choosing this meal? So a classic one for me is the movie, the book's great as well, Eat, Pray, Love. And if I ever watch the movie, then I know that I need to make sure that I have eaten. Doesn't matter what I've eaten, but I've got to have eaten before I watch the movie, because otherwise it's so beautifully filmed when they're in Italy with the indulgence and the sumptuousness of all the food that I start craving pasta and pizza. And actually, it's not mainstream that I would eat, but it's how we can then get sucked into those things. And this is how susceptible we can be. And we can get very caught up in a paradigm that, if we're not aware of it, it gets constructed to the point that we think it's real. And we end up building these perceptions around us and within us that we don't challenge, we don't question, because I am this kind of person. So I know for myself that there was a story that I got hooked up on that I thought was true, which was because I was the second born. That made I could only ever come second in things. And whenever I'd entered competitions, and even big competitions, so however many years ago, quite a few years ago now, I was in a competition called Britain's Next Top Coach, and I came second in it. I was the only female, so therefore I was crowned Britain's Next Top Female Coach. But nonetheless, overall, I came second. And there were so many things then that I started to notice. That was a paradigm shift for me of going, where else do I come in second? And I started to notice this was happening in other places. And it might be even in a queue, or it might be, I'd be at a conference and I'd raise my hand and I was the second person to be picked to ask a question. It was very subtle things. It was very small things. But what I started to question was, where have I created or into this paradigm, this perception of I am second, not second class, or was that a thinking? And very much that average, that dialogue was there. And now whenever I perceive it happening, is I just challenge it. I just think about it and go, well, is it true? Is it real? How do I know? Can I stretch it? Can I move it? Can I look at it from different angles? And what I know through conversations with clients, but also through conversations with friends, is that we get so caught in, this is who I am and this is how my life is. And you don't understand, no, my life can only be this way. That we block ourselves off to anything else that is possible. And I have, for the last 7 years, been volunteering at a women's charity here in York, and I go and coach the members there and the project, the women's project. Kira is the name of the charity, which is Kira Women's Project, and they support all sorts of women. Primarily, they may well have come out of a bad relationship, be it from a coercive domestic violence side of things. It may be that they are new to the area. It may be that they've had difficulties from a mental health or health perspective, physical health perspective. There's so many different reasons. But what I noticed through coaching the women there, because they're not the immediate sort of people that I would have been either connecting with in my day to day, or the kind of people that would have come to work with me one-on-one for a coaching client. But they opted for coaching there. And what has been so beautiful has been able to have conversations with them where we challenge the paradigm that they perceive is real. They perceive of, this is who I am and this is how my life needs to be or should be or can only be. And to challenge it, not because I'm wanting them to have my world or my life, but let's just check it. Does it bend? Has it got some flexibility? It's a little bit like with Sixth Sense. If you go back and watch it again, you'll see different things. You'll experience it in a different way. And it's like I've been playing around with a couple of movies that I really like, and I've got no problem with watching again. But my intention, rather than just sitting down and watching the movie, it's sort of putting metaphorical different glasses on. So I had a wonderful conversation with somebody a while back who spoke about the Matrix, the first Matrix, as being a Buddhist. They were talking about it from a Buddhist perspective, and they gave me loads of different ways of looking at it through the lens of Buddhism. So I went and rewatched it, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, I can see how that would be and how that would fit, and it just shifted what I perceived as this action sci-fi movie into something completely different. And then I did the same with one of my fave movies, which is Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds, my future husband, although he doesn't know that yet. It gave me the opportunity. I was talking to somebody about spiritual awakening, and without realizing it, said it's a bit like Guy in Free Guy. He has a spiritual awakening of realizing that he's not who he was, and his life is not what he thought it was. It's something different and could be something different. And it's that, and looking at those movies through a different lens, we get a completely different perspective. We can engage with it in a different way, learn, take things from it, enjoy it in a different way. And we can do that so much for ourselves. And very often we don't realize how much of our lives has been influenced by the environment that we grew up in, regardless of what that was like, through the influence of the education system, again, regardless of what that was like, and also regardless of where you came within that system from a scoring, whether it was average, second, or whether it was at the high end or the lower end. That's going to have influenced this paradigm of perception of this is who I am. And therefore, because this is who I am, this is what I deserve, this is what I'm capable of, this is what I don't deserve, this is what I'm not capable of. And if we don't question any of that, then that's the trajectory of our life. It's going to be following those rules and following those patterns. And one of the trainings that I offer, banishing the imposter syndrome, it's a big conversation, thankfully, that's come to the fore a lot more in the last few years. Now, the imposter syndrome was discovered or kind of spoken about, hypothesized in the 70s. And initially it wasn't called a syndrome, it was called a phenomena. And I think that's actually closer to what it is rather than it being a syndrome, because a syndrome is something that has symptoms that we can then identify with, and then we get hooked onto and we hold on to. This is something that I have, I do, I am. And it can be really restrictive rather than it being this phenomena, this imposter thinking, as I refer to it more. And within that training, one of the things that we look at is the terms and conditions that we've unconsciously set for ourselves. And those terms and conditions can be the extreme of I have to always get it right, I must be perfect, or I've got to know all the answers before I give something a go. And without realizing it, what we can end up doing is putting those terms and conditions become a binding process for us that don't give us any freedom, like terms and conditions do in a corporate context as well. Is that they can be, not obviously always, but they can be really binding. But the more freedom that we can have, the more opportunity we can give ourselves to step away from that and just challenge that viewpoint and see whether it's not about right or wrong, but is it helpful for me? Is it how I want to live my life? And if it's not, then what would I need to do differently, think differently, be different in order for me to engage with something different? So I know, for example, that some of the conversations that I have with clients can often go through the lens of this is how something should be. And I can only have X if I've done all of the other letters of the alphabet in order to get there, rather than realizing that X might be possible. There might be a shortcut. We don't have to just live it in or look for it in one way. There are other ways, but we can only access those other ways when we drop down those rules and challenge those perceptions. And I just want to be very clear that this is absolutely a work in progress for me. One of the things that my coach and I, yes, I have a coach too. My coach and I talk about, he will often talk about a leap of faith. And that's something that's been a challenge in numerous ways for me. And there's been a lot of this second class, this second average paradigm and perception that I not consciously created, that was there. And the ruling with that was because of being second, therefore second equals deserves, can only have, rather than challenging that perception, because I'm pretty sure, even if I did a little bit of research, there are going to be many, whatever I'm looking for as successful, whether I'm looking at that from a monetary perspective, or whether that's a relational, whether that's spiritual, whether that's whatever the rule is I want to put in there. I'm pretty sure that there are going to be many children that are now adults that were born second that have achieved those things. So it can't be a factual paradigm, but it is certainly a paradigm that's impacted my life. And I think that's what's important for us all to recognize, is that this is about the paradigms that are in fact infecting and affecting our lives. And it's about time, with an infection, that we cleared it up. That we, to clear up an infection, you've really got to see what the infestation is. And in this instance, the infestation for me is a lot of thinking that thinks it's true and factually correct, because it's never been challenged, it's never been questioned. And my job now is to question it, because I would like to live in an unknown new paradigm. I'd love to be watching the movie of my life play out every day and not have preconceived ideas of what's going to turn up, and play and experiment with it in a very different way. And knowing that I can do that, knowing that these rules, these expectations, these T's and C's are going to come up and buffer up against this pursuit, if that's the right word to use, of experimentation. But that's okay. That's okay, because I want to see those terms and conditions. I want to experience that and give myself the opportunity to free myself. I spoke on one of the themes on the community, the Conscious Conversations membership that I run. The community chooses the theme every month, and one of the months recently was Fearlessly Living. And I spoke about how much we can, without realizing, we grab hold of these rules and these conditions out of fear, and rather than challenging them and putting them down just to see what then goes on. And obviously we want to make sure that we're physically safe, but for the majority of us, the majority of the time, we are. But the thinking tells us that we're not. So often it's about checking. And if you want to challenge yourself, you want to live in a different way, then you probably are going to buffer up against seeing some of those rules, experiencing some of those rules, and questioning some of those rules. But my guess is, if you are listening to this podcast, is that you want to learn, you want to do something differently, you want to grow, you want to evolve. And that can only happen through conscious conversations that you're having internally with thinking. And that doesn't have to be about, oh, I'm such an idiot. That kind of critical thinking, critique thinking is not helpful. But to challenge it and to question it through the lens of curiosity, through the lens even of love, could potentially give you the opportunity to explode your paradigm of what is possible for you and break you free of chains that you may not even have realized that you were in. But that starts with you wanting to challenge it. And that may be about looking to challenge your external world, But even to do that, it's going to start from an internal perspective. So give yourself the opportunity to do that. Notice the paradigm that you've created for yourself, which could be, by the way, it could be about always being first. I have to always be first. And actually that can come with its own challenges. I coach a lot of people around that, around perfectionism, because then that stops them from experimenting and having to go with things. So it's not about moving from second to always being first. And it's also not about moving from second to always being last or second or coming, but it's about simply breaking free from those paradigms that we have to create a world. Or it's not even, actually, that's a lie. It's not about creating the world. It's about letting go of the constructed paradigm that it really is free guy, rather than being in that repetitious. I haven't seen the movie Free Guy, great movie. That repetitious being a non-playable character, doing the same thing every day, routine, and not really noticing what else is there until one day you put those glasses on that give you the opportunity to go, holy crap, I didn't know that was a viable thing for me. And not only discovering that, but then discovering a whole new world, which has limitless possibilities. That's my intention for me. It's my intention for this podcast and my business in general. But it's an invitation that I offer out to you as well. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments on challenging and questioning that paradigm and where that leads you to. I look forward to speaking to you again on another episode of Coming to Your Senses.